Good evening, council members. My name is Dan Drugan. I'm with Cayugas Municipal Water District. I'm joined with our general manager, Anthony Goff, who's in the audience as well. And we're here tonight for a very important item. And it's at times as a city council, it might feel like you're managing from crisis to crisis. If it's not housing, it's something else. And now this summer, drought is going to be a defining issue for us in Southeast Ventura County. On our title slide right here, this is an image that we've really tried to put out and disseminate through our service area that if you live in Southeast Ventura County and you're served by Cayugas, this is your water supply. That is an image of Lake Oroville. That is one tentacle of the lake where the Enterprise Bridge crosses it. And you can see just how in a few years, how it looked from 2019 to 2021. And in fact, Enterprise Bridge area of Oroville looks very similar to that today in 2022. Today, we actually had the governor who came down to Southern California, and he was at the Metropolitan Water District's site for their planned new water recycling facility, where he announced that the snowpack today is at 17% of average, where it should be, and that we need to double down on our conservation efforts as the state has not seen the level of conservation that they would like to see statewide throughout California. A little background about Cayugas. We were formed in 1953. By our local communities to develop a supplemental source of supply. Took us some time to figure out how to best do that, and we actually annexed to the Metropolitan Water District in 1960 to provide imported water. And so we are a wholesaler of water. Now it's primarily state water. It's been that way since 1972 to 19 retail water agencies throughout that shaded area, that yellow area in Southeast Ventura County, serving about 640,000 residents. We're governed by a 5-member elected board, and we have 70 employees that work at the district. The city of Oxnard, this is an image of your service area. And for Oxnard, your utility is our 3rd largest customer. On average, you purchase about between 10,500 acre feet of water, and an acre foot, that's approximately 326,000 gallons of water. So if you can think of an acre foot of water, it's approximately a football field long, about 1 foot deep of water that we serve. And so that's about 10,500 acre feet that we serve to Oxnard on a yearly basis. So some key takeaways from Cayugas to you tonight is that there are insufficient supplies to meet normal demands in the Cayugas service area this year. This is in fact the worst drought in the history of Cayugas since water began flowing from the State Water Project to our service area. The Department of Water Resources, they are the operator of the State Water Project, which I'll describe in a little bit here, and they're prepared to provide a block of water to meet critical human health and safety needs to the Metropolitan Water District. And in fact, Metropolitan is expecting to take that in June, and Cayugas will receive deliveries of that water supply, that special supply, starting in June. When we start taking that supply for human health and safety needs, there is a high probability of a no outdoor water use mandate for a portion of this year as soon as September and into next year. So how did we get here? Let's first talk about the imported water system and how the State Water Project works. So the State Water Project takes water supplies from the snowpack in the Northern Sierras. You can think of that as California's water bank. And so what happens is there's the accumulation of snow and precipitation throughout the winter periods all the way in through the spring. And then in the springtime, that snowpack melts into reservoirs, tributaries that go downstream into the Bay Delta. And so the headworks of the State Water Project is Lake Oroville, which is that title slide that you saw. It's a 3.5 million acre foot reservoir. And when it drains south with the Feather River, it meets up with the Sacramento River before draining into the Delta. What you don't see on this image is Lake Shasta on the top up there where it feeds the Sacramento River. Lake Shasta is the headworks of the Central Valley Project, and that feeds the farming communities, primarily in the Central Valley, the San Joaquin area. Now the Bay Delta, when all that water travels there by gravity, we must pump it south through major pumps that the Department of Water Resources operates, and then it travels conveyed through the California Aqueduct to Southern California. You can see a couple of different branches there. There's the coastal branch. There's also the west branch right there, which connects us up to Ventura County. And then there's also the east branch, which connects up in the San Bernardino area. Now, the one reason why the drought wasn't so bad in 2021 was that we had access to the Colorado River supply for the metropolitan service area. In fact, you saw the dominoes fall in 2021 with a lot of communities in Northern California falling in a drought state of emergencies first. and Metropolitan was able to maximize its deliveries from the CRA into its area. But now what we're facing with two back-to-back very critically dry years with our Sierra snowpack, the amount of Colorado supplies that are coming in are not enough for the areas that are truly impacted by the state water shortfall this year. So what are we dealing with? This is it on one image right here, and it's climate change. What we see in the last 10 years, we've only had 2 years where our snowpack was above average and significantly above average. You can see the years 2012 through 2016, those were the Governor Brown drought years. And then 2017 happened. We had the amazing storms that came in and busted us out of the drought. And then in 2018, a critically dry year with the Sierra snowpack. In 2019, another really heavy water year, another banner year. In fact, we had excess supplies that year that Cayugas we actually stored over in our well field near Moore Park. And now 2020 through 2022, 3 consecutive dry years of snowpack on the Sierra system. And how that Sierra snowpack translates to water supplies the Department of Water Resources provides to Southern California looks something like this. And I would actually focus your attention on the red line, and you can think of that red line as being the degrading reliability of the supply over time, and especially pronounced over the last 10 years due to that climate change. And in the history of the State Water Project, ever since the 60s, there has never been a back-to-back single-digit final allocation of this system until now. And so we've had 2 back-to-back 5% State Water Project allocations, and that's the allocation that Metropolitan Water District receives, and that's the water that it has to provide Cayugas, and then we provide that to Oxnard. So in summary, we're dealing with a 3rd year of extreme drought, the driest 3-year period here on the state water system, and the driest 3 months. Just in December in 2021, we had the snowiest month on record in California. We followed that up with the driest 3-month period in California history in that January through March timeframe. That has resulted now with the past 3 years in the State Water Project with the lowest 3-year delivery total from this system in history to Metropolitan and to Cayugas. This image on the bottom here, the average expectation from the State Water Project system over just these past 3 years should have been 3.2 million acre feet. The department's own lowest modeling forecast for the system was estimated to be 1 million acre feet. But now today, we're only receiving a fraction of what the state's own modeling assumed for this system. So what that tells us is that the modeling needs to change, and we need to incorporate climate change modeling more with how we manage our water systems into the future. So the areas that will be impacted by State Water Project shortfall this year are in these shaded blue and shaded red areas. To the West Branch, you can see Cayugas Municipal Water District, Los Virgenes Water District, and the City of Los Angeles. And then to the east, on the East Branch of the State Water Project, those are the water agencies that overlie the main San Gabriel Basin and the Chino Basin area. Very different, the red shaded areas do have more local supplies on the aggregate than the areas on the blue to the left. And the City of LA is in a very dire situation this year due to the sublimation of its Owens Valley supply, its Owens Valley snowpack that feeds its LA aqueduct. So now it needs to swing on to the available state water supplies that Metropolitan has to offer. So the City of LA is the largest volumetric draw of state water supplies this year. This is how the Cayugas system connects to the Metropolitan system, the Metropolitan system being in light blue, the Cayugas system in red. And how this works is Castaic Lake is up there at the top, and that's the terminus of the West Branch. And so those supplies travel down to Metropolitan's Jensen treatment plant in Granada Hills, and then treated water, 100% treated state water supplies are conveyed to Cayugas at that interconnection right there between Chatsworth and Simi Valley. And so that connection point travels through the Santa Susana Mountains. That's the one connection point that we have to Metropolitan and to these state water supplies. If anything, this image right here, it's to give you a sense of the end of the pipe. What does the end of the pipe of the State Water Project system look like? And now it's down to a trickle all the way down to us in Southeast Ventura County. So back to this slide that shows the 2 imported watersheds that feed into the metropolitan service area. The Bay Delta. The Bay Delta is a critical pinch point for our state water system. And right now, during critical drought, how is that system being operated to preserve water quality? What we have right here is a timeline of the announcements that had occurred to where we are today. So December 1st, 2021, the Department of Water Resources, they're the operator of this system, they announced that we should actually plan for a 0% state water allocation. And this is how they view operating through the Delta in a situation through a critical drought. And what they're doing is they're prioritizing water supplies in Lake Oroville to flush out the salinity that's intruding into the Delta. Similar to issues here in Oxnard with the salinity that intrudes in the groundwater basins. You need fresh water supplies to push that salinity out. If you don't do that, then you might lose the ability to convey fresh water supplies through this environmentally sensitive area. So the state is prioritizing water supplies in Lake Oroville to flush out the salinity and also prioritize water for human health and safety needs. This was back in December when the state had announced a 0% initial allocation from this system. But then what happened? We had the snowiest month on record in December. The snowpack was so abnormally huge at that time that the runoff projections were through the roof. And in fact, when the state had revised the allocation up to 15%, that was viewed as quite conservative. And so at that point, with a 15% allocation, which with some expectation of the snowpack being so high that might even be revised up further, we actually had enough water supplies to meet all demands for the year at that time. But then, as we know, what happened after January 20th, this just kind of gives you a sense of that. In December, 19 trillion gallons had poured across the state. And then January, February, March, essentially nothing. And that's how this looks right here on a graph. This is the aid station index that tracks the precipitation accumulation up in the Northern Sierra watersheds. We were tracking some of the wettest years on record. And then all of a sudden we flatlined just January through March. And it's not just 1 year. We've had 3 consecutive years of below average precipitation. And that's what we're facing here with our state water project system. So right now we're only at 40 inches of accumulated precipitation. We should be at about 53. And these late season storms that we've experienced just in April, that's still not enough for an increase in our state water supply this year. But it is enough to extend the availability of health and safety supplies that the department has committed to providing us. And this is what happened. This is when the shoe had dropped on March 18th due to the 3 consecutive really dry months. The department had revised down the 15% allocation to 5%. So what changed when the allocation dropped from 15% to 5%? Well, with a 15%, with the bar graph on the left, we were able to meet all normal demands for the 6.6 million people that depend on this supply for the year. You can see that base 15% allocation, the light blue box at the bottom, almost 300,000 acre feet. But then on the right, when that allocation dropped to 5%, you can see that base supply being cut into a third at just under 100,000 acre feet. We see new bars coming at the top for demand reduction and for health and safety water supplies. Demand reduction is very self-explanatory. That's the need for mandatory conservation. And health and safety supplies, that's that extraordinary supply that the state will provide to Metropolitan and to Cayugas. How this looks on a monthly time step, how we can plan through this year. Starting in June, you can see that tan bar coming up with the health and safety supplies. We also see a white box at the top of that that says the need to conserve and underdevelopment. Those are, that's actually mandatory conservation that you see right there, the need for that conservation to occur from June through the end of the year. Now, if we don't conserve, and if at the end of this, our demands are much higher than this, there will be the expectation that we move to a no outdoor watering mandate or another type of allocation system that would be more punitive. A little bit more on the health and safety needs water supply. This is that special block of water that the state will provide, and it's intended for drinking water, sanitation, and fire suppression. And there's a big expectation here that it excludes outdoor watering. And that's what this looks like right here. So how do we avoid this? How do we best avoid no outdoor water use right now? And so what Metropolitan Water District did on April 26th was adopt an emergency water conservation plan that allows agencies to choose 2 pathways. One pathway would be the 1 day a week watering restriction, which we've seen in the news. It's been very highly publicized. Or agencies can choose a member agency volumetric target. And so what that is, it's the base 55 gallons per capita per day that the state is willing to backstop for that essential human health and safety need. And then Metropolitan's available supplies from the state water system on top of that. And so you might have seen in the news what that number would be right now is about 80 gallons per capita per day. And so with the 1 day a week restriction, there's no volumetric penalties if agencies move to the 1 day a week and they show that they're enforcing it. Functionally, that might be a little bit more water than the volumetric target. And that's why we're urging communities to go to the 1 day a week. It's a clearer message to the public of what we need to do. And there's also that ability to enforce it to your local control. If you want to have exemptions for parks, for school fields, for areas that might need that extra day a week of watering, that would be up to your own water shortage contingency plan and how you implement that for exemptions. So there's more local control with how you implement your 1 day a week watering restriction. A little bit more on this concept of gallons per capita per day. You can think of this as every person in and around your home, you use a certain volume of water per day. The average family of 4 uses more than 300 gallons per water per day at the home. The vast majority of this in the Cayugas service area is outdoors. We estimate that it's about 40 to 70%, depending on where you are in the Cayugas service area, of that water use. The California indoor standard for indoor water use is 55 gallons per capita per day. And that's the reason why the state has based that decision for their health and safety block of water on that 55 GPCD. So what are we asking? With the 1 day a week watering restriction, what are we focused on? And it's non-functional turf and residential turf. Residential turf, we've been there. The last drought, that was the big target, right? Your lawn provides no economic benefit to the state. We need residents to come together to really let their grass go brown or take out the turf entirely. And so once again, we're asking residential customers to do that. But also we have now a new, more defined target this drought. It's non-functional turf. And so these are areas that are around our commercial business parks, areas that are hiding in our community that provide no recreational value, no civic value. And that turf right now is in the rulemaking process to have the irrigation banned in these areas. And in fact, we should hear more about that from the State Water Board in the next few weeks, where they expect the regulation to go into effect the second week in June, that these areas should actually be banned with all the irrigation to this type of turf. Southern Nevada Water Authority has been a pioneer on the non-functional turf grass initiative. What's the difference? Non-functional turf, again, like I mentioned, it provides no civic value, no recreational value to residents and communities. Functional grass, that's your sports fields, your parks, the other areas that do have that high community value. We're going to hear more about the rulemaking process from Newsom's March 28th executive order in the next couple of weeks. And we do have rebates to assist. That's a big point here, is that we're part of a very successful rebate program with bewaterwise.com. And so residents, businesses, they can get in and reserve for a substantial amount of money, up to $3 per square foot, to remove turf grass. And obviously, I would recommend that businesses get into that right away. It's there for the taking. And now with that 1 day a week watering restriction, the program will actually allow some postponement of irrigating those new plantings because they do take some water to be established. And so they'll allow that until supplies come back into the system and our water supply conditions improve. So drought actions in summary, April 26th, I mentioned Metropolitan approved their mandatory conservation program. On April 7th, just 1 day after, we approved the same for our purveyors to move forward with this process in May, to come to your policy board here to approve the same mandates, emergency water restrictions. And then June 1st is the compliance period for the restrictions. This is an example of some outreach that we're doing. This is not only a crisis of supply, but a crisis of communication. We're very fortunate to work with your staff here at Oxnard that have been really great at helping to come up with different types of marketing that we can put together, disseminate throughout the community, because that's a push here that we need to get our residents on board and mobilized with this information. And then finally, we do have a drought response task force. And this is a new initiative for Cayugas. We're allowing residents, actually representatives from each city and large agency that we serve to be a part of these meetings. And the goal of these meetings is to be a consolidated one-stop shop for information and updates on the drought. We can share ideas, have a coordinated response together with all of us in terms of messaging, trucking and recycle water. What other ways can we do to increase supply, get down to that 80 GPCD for conservation? Everything will be on the table, and we'll have our first meeting coming up here on March 25th. So that'll be next week. And that's the end of the briefing. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councilwoman Lopez, do you have a question or a comment?
Thank you, Mayor. I had raised my hand before the presentation, which thank you. That was really great, and glad to see it, given where we are at and how important it is for all our residents and community to understand the impacts, especially when you see the images. You would think it's been 10 years, the water level in Oroville, and to see that it was just 3-4 years ago, it's mind-blowing. But before your presentation, I actually want to ask Mr. Wolf, and I can wait for that, Mr. Wolf, or whenever, but to summarize what the new resolution would be, what changes we will be seeing. And then additionally, as was mentioned by the presenter, the enforcement, how What is the enforcement plan for the city and the outreach to get this information as widely as possible?
Thank you, Councilwoman Lopez. So the changes that we are recommending is to be consistent with our partners with Cayugas, so that as Dan mentioned, the focal point is making sure, well, at least our focal point is making sure we don't have penalties come June 1st. And so with two pathways, two opportunities, we looked at our gallons per capita per day, and we weren't going to be able to make that from a volumetric standpoint. So the resolution that's here tonight is to address that by applying the 1 day a week watering requirements. And so the big change, the big shift from our current stage 2 resolution is, instead of having a 2 day a week watering allowance, we're going down to 1 day a week watering allowance. So that's the biggest change. We've tried to bold those in our staff report. So if anybody does have the staff report available, you can see anything that's in bold on, I believe it's the 3rd page of the staff report, but page 553 of the actual agenda. So no more than once a week, watering on Saturdays and Sundays, and we can talk about why we're making that recommendation, but set watering on Saturdays and Sundays. We do list some exceptions. Again, we want to make sure that we're not, we're looking at trees and things like that. We want to make sure we're not ignoring those items that need to be addressed from that standpoint. Anybody who has high efficiency irrigation systems, we're obviously looking at that as a good usage, and it didn't want to not allow those. The other big one, we wanted to make sure we're addressing it with the fire marshals, any of the urban wildland interface areas. So that's also addressed in our new resolution. And I believe the last one is just we're making it clear about ornamental turf in streets. Before it said public streets, we just wanted to address any and all streets, and talked about, as Dan mentioned, the non-functioning turf is really a key component of that. So those are the big changes, really the big one, going down to 1 day a week. The other part of tonight's recommendation from staff is the proclamation for the emergency. As Dan mentioned, you could see some of the big swings that we've just seen in the last couple of months about how much we thought we were going to have and now how much we're actually going to have. And one of the things we wanted to be proactive about and flexible about is giving the city manager some authority to make some changes if necessary, because we may see some big changes. And so tonight, we're also suggesting that the council proclaim a local emergency for a drought, giving the city manager some authorities inside the parameters of council approved documents, which is our water contingency shortage plan and our urban water management plan. As long as we live within those documents, we're looking for some authority to work within those as we have to react to some of the things that we may see from the state. Second part of your question, or third, two other parts of your question. One was enforcement, one was outreach, right? So the enforcement process, we're going through the municipal code stated enforcement process. Again, that's enumerated in a staff report here. So first violation is a notice. Second violation is a follow-up of that notice. The third violation is where we'll really start applying some potential fees or penalties, if you will. So that's laid out in that process. So the first one, again, is a courtesy notice. The second one is the warning letter. Then the third one, potentially we can go up to a 25% or $25, depending on which one's greater on the utility bill for a third notice of the violation within the same 12 months. And then after that, we would step it up. So fourth violation would be a 50% or $50, whichever is greater. And then we do have a catch-all at the end within our code would allow for different citation levels as we ratchet it up. So that's the enforcement component, which is a big component of what Met's asking for. It needs to be auditable, if you will. It needs to have a standard process. So we're using our existing municipal code for that. And the outreach component is a very big and key component. You've probably noticed some of our signs that we put up, trying to get that message out there. And we're trying to avoid a little bit of the message whiplash, if you will. That's the term that we're using. And we don't want to go too far overboard if all of a sudden we're going to change to no watering at some point in time, but we want to get that message out as much as possible. So that means any and all mechanisms, social media, print, bill stuffers, the changeable message signs that you're seeing. We even going to partner with Met and Cayugas on their larger approaches, whether that's radio or advertisement. We want to make sure it's also in English and Spanish. And so we're looking at addressing all of those opportunities, newspaper ads. So anything that, any way we can get the message out, we want to make sure we're doing that. But again, we want to be careful about that whiplash of going, okay, well, it's 1 day a week now, maybe it's 0 days a week. We just got to be a little careful of that. But we certainly want to get out there as strong as possible about conserving, regardless of how you're going to do it. That's a key component of that. I wanted to add one other thing, and we're going to try to do as much visual as possible. So we're talking about signage, whether that's yard signs in our parks. So there's another opportunity for us to get that out. Because sometimes some folks don't have social media or aren't maybe listening to the radio or reading the newspaper. So trying to get all kinds of different medias out there so that we can get that message out.